This is Jonathan Tomaszewski, and you're listening to the Matt Bolliker Podcast.
Hello, good people out there. Thank you once again for tuning into the Matt Bolliker Podcast. To earn extra credit, please like, subscribe, and encourage 5.5 of your friends to do the same. Today's guest is an old friend of mine. He can ride a bike without ending up in the ER. He's a hilarious comic with an impressive tattoo collection. You might have seen his real estate ad if you sat on a bus stop bench in North Hollywood. Please welcome John Tomaszewski to the program. How you doing, John?
Matt, what's up, dude?
Well, I'm glad we have an audio feed because your artwork is very impressive. I want to get into your background, but when did you get your first piece?
Are you talking about tattoos?
Yeah.
Oh man, I got my first one when I was like in my early 20s. I actually did my first one on myself. So a good friend of mine was a tattoo artist, learning tattoo artist. So back in the day, I don't know how it is now, but a couple decades ago and beyond that, you would learn just messing around, like poking needles in your skin, or you'd buy a tattoo machine from like the back of a magazine, like a crappy tattoo machine, and you would tattoo in your house. I mean, it's crazy to think back now, because now I'd be like, oh my God, the bloodborne pathogen, son, don't do that.
But this is the late 80s and we're sharing tattoos. What could go wrong?
Exactly. Yeah.
No, it wasn't quite the late 80s.
In Philadelphia, no less. No, this is in SoCal. So,
oh, okay, well, then it's fine.
Yeah, we were just getting tweaker diseases, so hepatitis. So my buddy, Gabe, amazing dude, wasn't even really an artist. He just wanted to tattoo and loved getting tattooed. He was in the military, and he was getting shipped off. Okay, so this is 20 years ago. Was it Afghanistan or Iraq? What foreign conflict?
Pick one war that hasn't ended in the last...
Where did our corporate masters have us blowing up 20 years ago?
Iran, Iraq, because it was Saddam Hussein that blew up the World Trade Towers, right? And so, we had to go. No, yeah, it could have been Afghanistan. It could have been Iran.
Yeah.
Pick a foreign conflict.
Lie
yeah, exactly.
Did we buy to send our? Was that Louis joke? He's fighting.
Yeah,
for
man. Who knows?
He thinks. No. So my buddy Gabe was shipping out. I was already. I mean, I grew up drawing. Mm-hmm. But I'm a Jew, so never thought tattoos I could do. I was always envious of Anthony Kiedis and Axl Rose for their tattoos because I love rock and roll. But it was not an option as a Jew. But my friend Gabe was like, dude, I got to ship out. I'm going overseas for war. Here's the keys to my mom's house. Go knock yourself out. So I tattooed a heart on my leg, like a little heart, on my thigh, which is the practice pad for most tattoo artists when they're learning. And then just all of my crazy lowbrow punk rock and redneck friends, a combination of the best of both kinds, were like, dude, tattoo me. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, do my whole leg. I was like, okay. I mean, I literally had friends, tweaker brothers, passing out, not from the tattoo, but just because they're tweaked out, crazy dudes, passing out, falling over. And I was like, is this normal? I'm just by myself in my friend's house too. Where do they keep the paper towels? And then I eventually, by the grace of God, met wonderful people, and my friends Josh and Jen Davis at Outer Limits were let me be a shop helper there, so that became a job, and then I kind of learned from them. Then I got an apprenticeship.
Wow! Wait, so
Mike and Tom.
How old were you when this started?
Dude, I was
when you actually were apprenticing.
This is a couple decades ago, and I'm 25 now, so I think I was 23.
So, yeah, I'm pretty good at math. That checks out. So. You were practicing on inebriated people who were too passed out to consent, and you're like, this is a great pad to practice.
Hey, watch yourself, Matt. They were consenting adults, most of them men. Now I sound like Jeffrey Dahmer.
83%, I think, were male.
No, these were consenting people, and yes, a fair handful of them, they were just, like I said, young 18 to 25, 30-year-old punk rockers that I was like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, that's even cooler, dude. And I was just messing up. But then I would take pictures of them. I already knew how to draw and paint a little bit. So I would take that to my friend Josh Davis and Jen Davis at Outer Limits, who were pro amazing tattoo artists, which I have a bunch of pieces from them. And I would show them and they'd be like, whoa, this kid's good. But I don't know again, I don't know how it is now. Everybody's on the internet. This is way before like Instagram and TikTok. But like back in the day, if you wanted to learn how to tattoo, and I think it's right this way. It's beautiful that they had it this way, but I was a rebellious kid. You really had to earn it. It's like being a sushi chef. Like you're going to spend years doing the grunt work, getting yelled at. I mean, I left crying. I quit a couple jobs crying, like, fuck you guys, I'm out of here, because it's brutal. And then they would tell you how it was more brutal when they learned. They're like, I had to throw Molotov cocktails through competing tattoo artists like windows. We're just asking you to take the trash out and never fuck up. And I was like, oh, it's still too much. I'm neurodivergent. At the time, I just said, I'm retarded. But now we just say neurodivergent. So many syllables for retarded people like myself. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It does. I remember, I think we may have met at Winston's years ago, and I not only loved your comedy, but I saw a lot of janky tattoos, in the early 2000s, and like you were young, and like your work was really good. So I was always, both your stand-up work, but more importantly,
thanks, man.
Your tattoo work.
I had a guy threaten to kill me once from the stage because I was new, and obviously I like to push people's buttons. And he was a Nazi in a trailer park bar that I was performing in, and he started sig heiling, and he whispered, it was a empty room, he whispered to his girlfriend like this fucking whatever he called me, probably a derogatory Jew term.
I just met you at the time. Now that I know you better, I would not have said that again. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. You can. You're allowed to. Fair. It's like most slurs, like when you're my friend and I know
we're in the same group. It's cool.
It's comedy. You're just riffing with me. Call me what you will. Make fun of my people all you want. I don't mind. It's when a stranger says, "This guy with his shop tattoos." That's when you know you're about to get not just beat up, but possibly shivved or worse. I don't know if there's anything worse than that. When someone criticizes you because you have shop tattoos because all their tattoos were done with a needle for doing hard time. So I appreciate that you noticed my shop tattoos.
So you're performing in front of no one but some neo-Nazi, who's calling you out, and
he might be listening to this, so hopefully he doesn't find me. But if he does, and he needs to sell his trailer, I do have a friend who's an expert in mobile home sales. It's different than residential, than regular stick-built residential most of the time. I was doing Richard Weissman's show out at this. I don't know if it was called Nickel or something. It was in Riverside. It was 2 trailers put together, and that was the bar. Like, you're in, like, people don't realize, like, 20 years ago, even SoCal was like very much like, there's some very Alabama, like what your friends in the country bands talk about. And you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of like where I was, like, you're at risk for being lynched. And so, but I'm a loudmouth asshole with a microphone, just excited to like keep pushing. Like, I don't know what it is about me where it's like, let's see if they can, my people are just like, the reason we entertain, we're just used to someone shooting guns at the ground going, dance, Jew. So it's in my blood to be like, let's push this farther and see if I can really get him to tie a noose up. And I was making a joke about Hitler having a MySpace, and, I was being really silly about it, but this guy started Sieg Heiling, and I was like, sir, you don't have to commit to the joke that hard.
Yeah, and that's a little much.
He was a big, scary dude. Like a Jim Croce, was it Junkyard Jim or whatever? Like, you're just like, okay, this guy you don't mess around with Jim. His girlfriend, this room's almost like everyone's quieted down now because they're like, this Jew boy is going to get killed. Let's watch this and finally some real entertainment, a real comedy show. His girlfriend, I just kept pushing buttons, Matt. Just kept pushing. His girlfriend goes, honey, you just got out. And we can all hear it because the room's dead quiet. So I'm on the stage like, whoa. He just got out. Like, I know exactly what that means. Like,
out of the manicurist, right?
Yeah, out of your doctor's appointment, hopefully at Kaiser, getting your meds. No, out of jail. And he was so big that he looked like, those guys who seem so angry that, like, I could break a chair over his back and that would just make him more angry. That's what this guy looked like. So Richard Weissman was kind enough to, after my set, like, which ended very abruptly after that, he escorted me, if you want to call it backstage, behind the bar and out the back door to my car, and I was like, get the fuck out of here. I drove away like, wow, I'm a real rock and roller comedian. That was scary.
Yeah. I mean, I remember those shows and doing some AA convention, and I like the AA ones in Riverside better because they were kind of like the reformed version of the people you met. So when you left Riverside, what was home? Like, where did you lay your head?
That guy's listening, Matt. You want me to tell him? No, it was Chino Hills, which at the time was like a fancy equestrian, like it was like the nice area of Chino, which is all dairy farms, and Chino Hills was like, like the fancy equestrian area. It was a small town, not like it
Yeah.
is now. We have a Barnes and Noble and a Cheesecake Factory, but in the old days, no, it was just like a beautiful. I loved it too, by the way. All my friends complained like this place sucks. It was like cool to be like this place sucks. LA is cool. And
Yeah.
then you get older and you're like LA fucking sucks. Chino Hills is awesome. Anyways,
Yeah, I grew up in Carlsbad, which is honestly one of the
Oh,
most
yeah.
like scenic places in the world. I was like, Carlsbad's so boring. They're just like sand and beaches and boardwalks. Like,
Awful.
I can't wait to get out of here.
awful. What do you even do? Like all my friends, I still have two of my best friends from that era. I still have a ton of friends from that era, but my two best friends from that era are still like grumpy 15-year-olds and they're also in their 40s. And I'm like, what do you fucking want? Like, do
Exactly.
you want, they literally like, they want someone to like dangle something in front of their faces and tickle their balls and be like, everything's great. You're like, yeah, dude, like,
I
life's
mean, I'd
tough.
like some ball tickling that would make it better, but I think it's just teen angst.
Ball
Like you could be in paradise. You're like, it's too perfect here. I need some adversity. I need
It's
to go
part-
to LA.
Right? It's part of teenage life. I mean, were the football stars who were getting laid with all the gorgeous chicks, were they also complaining or were they just like, there's
No,
another
just
place?
me. Yeah.
Like, I don't look at maps unless it's on a woman's body.
So, did you
Yeah.
ever actually? Because we did a lot of shows in LA, but also San Diego. Did you ever live in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I lived in Los Angeles for more than a decade. I mean,
Okay.
I loved it when I lived there, but I always like listened to interviews with people like Doug Stanhope, and there was a famous. I want to maybe not famous. That's a really bad choice of words. I have a vocabulary of an immigrant from 30 years ago. I don't. I'm still trying to figure. I'm like Mr. Miyagi. I'm like that word just works for a lot of stuff. There was an editor and she lived in Arizona. Both these people live in Arizona, but I always fantasized. I was like, oh man, I can't wait till I have a comedy career and I can get the hell out of the city because our sushi is fantastic. There is a little bit of a feel of magic because you're by Sony and Paramount and buy these things. Everyone talks about you can go to the mountains in the same day as the beach. It's like, do you have a helicopter? Because like LA, you can't do anything. It's miserable. And like just going to the grocery store, like you go to Rock and Roll Ralph's on Sunset, you're like, everyone wants to kill themselves but me first. What a depressing area. I think everybody talks about that, right? That lives in
Yeah.
LA that's not from there. But I lived there for more than a decade. I lived in Los Feliz. I lived in Glendale. I lived in Mid-City. Mid-City was great, dude. Like
Mid-City's
right by,
fun. Yeah.
oh, right by LACMA and the tar pits. And like, again, great sushi. Our French food in LA, dude, we have the best French. Like I've been to Paris and my wife and I were like, I mean, we had one good meal that was like noteworthy, but like most of us, like I've had the best crepes in LA. I've had the best like braised chicken and foie gras and freaking tartar. Like LA has the world-class food. So it's great for all that. But if you're not rich, it's like, oh God, how much longer can I handle this? Where's nature? You know, then you go to Griffith for 20 minutes, but you're like, you know,
Like I can kind of see downtown. That counts as nature, right?
downtown. I mean, it's all nature if you're going to look at it from a 30,000 foot view. Yes, we are the wildest chimpanzees that ever lived, as far as we know. Unless Graham Hancock's right. Maybe there was more.
There might have been more, but so your intro to stand up, it was in SoCal, or what was the first time you kind of broke your
this is
stand up
fun.
cherry?
Oh my God. Memory Lane with Matt Balaker. Let's see. Coming this fall to NBC, Middle Life Crisis Comics, describing where they started. I started in. Okay, so I always loved stand up, which is one of the things that's terrible about becoming a stand up comic for some people
Yeah.
like myself.
You never want to go to shows anymore unless you're on it. But yeah, go
Dude.
ahead.
I stopped listening to it because I heard like Brody Stevens once on stage say like I don't want it to rub off on me, and I was like ding. I was so impressionable, by the way. Like if I was a female, I would have ended up in porn or dead. Like I was really bad, really naive, like kid moving from like a countryside. Like everyone's great and everyone's like Kurt Cobain. Like it's artists supporting artists and like with good ethics. And then you get there and you're like, there was like 3 Kurt Cobains and a ton of that guy that was Lou Pearlman's. So it was a tough learning lesson. I would have ended up dead, or I have a lot of empathy for sex workers. I'm like, you guys. Someone lied to you and someone lied to me and somehow I got into real estate. But yeah,
Sex
anyways.
workers are like 3 to 4 levels above comedy and the total.
they are. That's why we get along with wrestlers, musicians, and nude
Chefs,
dancers
yeah.
and sex workers because like we all come from this place like we get naked out there for people and they fuck us and it's not always a healthy fucking that these people are giving us. So, anyways.
None of our holes can be filled. That's
That's
true.
Oh, well.
Okay, so your
We'll
first time.
we'll get into
Yeah,
adult
yeah, yeah.
sex in a little bit and what you end up enjoying when you get older a little bit. If my wife's going to listen, she
Yeah.
knows about the poker finger. Okay, so if you want to come like a champ, I was talking to two of my friends that are in their 30s and they're very like alpha male, and I was like, "Your wives don't stick their fingers in your ass when you come?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Are you worried about being gay? Like more than coming as hard as you possibly can? Are you guys fucking
You're a
crazy?"
boss. I mean, the finger just, if you gotta get the fist, you have to start with something. But please
Dude,
go ahead.
are we allowed to say whatever on your podcast, by the way?
Not generally, no, but
Oh my
you're
God.
breaking all protocol. Damn it!
I'm so sorry. Okay.
I'm gonna
I
get
like the
booted
beeps.
off Apple Podcast. No,
The bleeps make it better, Matt.
that's true. But bleeps take a lot of effort, and for this budget, I just leave them in. So
Okay. I
but
apologize
go
to
ahead.
our
So
listeners. I grew
I'm
up on
just-
Mr. Rogers. I
I'm just
respect
teasing.
him dearly, but I also grew up on Chris Rock, Bigger Blacker. Okay. So I went out with my wife. I'm a huge comedy fan. I loved Robert Schimmel. I loved people think this is crazy, but old Joe Rogan. Every time I brought it up, like
Oh.
old Joe Rogan, when he was
Yeah.
just like a college comic making like sex jokes, I thought he was amazing. Robert Schimmel, I grew up on Dave Attell. Norm Macdonald's sketch album was like one of my favorite albums. I didn't know much of his stand-up, and as an actor, I loved him. Chris Rock, Bigger Blacker was the biggest special of my
Still
childhood.
arguably the best ever, but
It's-
please continue.
I still compare everything to it, Maddie. I still go and watch people, and I'll be like, yeah, it's fun, like for people to see behind the scenes and watch Chappelle work out for 4 hours in Hollywood. But I'm just like, I'm bored. I want to watch you do your Olympic set. And Chris Rock did that. Chris Rock and Carlin. I used to love Bill Hicks when I was a kid. I thought like the idea, and I still am like romanced by witty, creative, weird hillbilly combos. Like Bill Hicks coming out in a duster when I was a kid was something like cowboy culture was very normal. Now it's very like conservative and like it's almost
Yeah.
we have like gay cowboy culture, which I fucking love. Thank God for Orville Peck. But we also have like this like machismo, like Arrested Development in the 50, not even 50. I don't know. It's so weird and old. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yellowstone, yeah.
The weird level of like caricature. Like it's like a South Park parody music. And you're like, this is what you're really listening to when we're driving. Is this a South Park song? No, this is just what look at the stickers on the, we the people.
Freedom isn't free, Chef's.
Freedom isn't free. Oh, what a great song, by the way. It's just a great country song. So seeing Bill Hicks come out on stage on like that was like inspiring for me as like just a young suburban kid, like loving like his wit and his style. So I was already into comedy. Nick Schwartzen was playing Robert Schimmel. I took my in-laws to see Robert Schimmel. I loved him. They loved him. Then they took me to go see Nick Schwartzen and my brother-in-law, who's a hilarious dude. And our whole family, like my wife and all of the sisters and brothers, we saw Nick Schwartzen at the Improv in Irvine, and they had a flyer for a comedy school. And my brother-in-law and I were like it was like a neon green flyer.
Yeah.
And we were just like, what? And so I met Gary Cannon and Steve Mazon, who are still two great friends to this day, great comics, great dudes. And yeah, we went and did that little comedy class. And I was like, immediately, the second they gave me the microphone, I'm sure as you can tell because I haven't stopped talking since you pressed record. I was like, people have to listen now. Like I grew up a kid where like my mom was like on the computer playing solitaire or like doing other shit. So I was like, mom, this is look at my drawing. Look at this idea. And I was very loved. Don't get me wrong. I love my mom.
It's the voice of the unhugged.
I was hugged aplenty and loved plenty, but paid attention to. My dad was at work his whole like young life, and my mom just has the attention span of a paperclip, and so it's not her fault. I know they talk about how like young people have
paper clips are great listeners, but they turn their head very frequently.
But they keep papers together.
Yeah.
And my mom kept our family together. But she didn't listen to a fucking. If the sentence was too long, my mom was like, They talk about how millennials and young people have no attention span. Boomers have no fucking attention span. I don't know if it's the Colgate commercials of their childhood. They have no attention span. So as soon as you're like, oh, you guys have to listen now, and I get high off of every laugh I get, I was hooked immediately. I was already tattooing and starting to make an actual living for the first time in my life. The devil reached up from below and tilted my shoulders towards something that was not going to give me an actual living, that I wasn't right for, that wasn't the world that I thought it was. What a bunch of ruses. But I was hooked right away. And Gary Cannon and Steve Mazon were like super supportive. And then I met Ralphie May, who was like insanely supportive and kind of launched a lot of. he fucked me up pretty bad. I wish I had some Rick Rubin books to read while Ralphie was telling me some bullshit, but Ralphie's heart was in the right place and he gave me a great opportunities and that kind of, yeah, I mean, I was just off to the races.
Yeah, I want to unpack something like you and I'm not just saying this, like from day one I loved your comedy.
Oh,
and this is at a time when I was scribbling through notes in the back of a bar or some dank place where I generally pay like 8% attention to what's going on because it's all about me and not, but you were so good where I had to like lift up from my hacky joke and listen. And then when you said like, it wasn't for me, I'm not arguing with that. I'm just curious. Like you kind of had the rebel spirit. You were a natural ham. You had great material. What wasn't for you?
Man, this is turning into a really good therapy too now. I mean, dude, like I think, you know, LA is great. I think of Joe Dosh, now Fifi Dosh, right? Fifi Dosh came from an area in the Midwest where she, at the time, was a young gay dude and was like basically abused, you know, standard abused by their town, and comes to LA and finds, even though she probably, I mean, when we used to hang out a bunch back in the day, she fucking hated LA and everything it stood for, but she had community there and she wasn't being like threatened with being lynched basically for being the gay dude in town.
Which is nice, yeah.
Yeah, and the same with like Angelo Bauer, same thing. Like he comes from Modesto, which he joked when I brought him to my hometown, Chino Hills, he's like, oh, Green Pie, it's just like Modesto. But like, it was a little bit more progressive than Modesto. Like even 20 years ago, it's like Modesto was like, he'd gotten beaten up by dudes in the back of a pickup truck. It was like they jumped out and like jumped him. We've all been jumped or been through weird shit like that, but like he was dealing with a lot more. So he comes to LA and it's like, oh, finally, I don't have to live in that square world and I can like live on everyone's couches was Angelo's thing, you know? Me, like I came from kind of, there's a warmth that I need. I'm sensitive. I'm soft. That's all I can say is like, I love life and people and like hugs and friendliness and like a healthy level of competition through a tribe that like is throwing sticks as far as they can. But at the end of the day, everyone gets a piece of meat and we all work together. And LA draws in the most creative people. It also builds the most competitive, and let's never forget, anything that involves acting, just like how churches and religious institutions draw in criminals because they don't pay taxes, anything that draws in acting, who's really good at acting? Fucking con artists, liars, schemers, dudes that want to get pussy at any cost, at the cost of breaking a woman's heart, or dudes that want to get, what do they call it? Man's ass now? The whole thing. Dudes that want to get laid at any cost, and they get pleasure out of the conquer of like someone's laying there crying, versus people that are like, well, I'm a horny dude. I love to get laid, but like I would like to get laid on like reasonable adult terms, between two human beings that like
within the confines of the law.
Yeah, I love a good like lusty, like no official love involved romp around, but like I would still want to go out to lunch with you and like stay in touch. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to trick you. Well, I probably have accidentally been like, and then in my head been like, it's about to go down. Just say what you got to say. But you know what I'm saying? You get where I'm going.
Yeah.
So LA draws that in. It also brings in, like Mel Brooks, so I'm not going to, hopefully Mel Brooks isn't a womanizer, right? Anne Bancroft was the last lady he had sex with, right? Mel?
Sure, yeah.
You haven't had sex with anyone since she died, right? You're still my hero. Okay. I heard Larry David's really cool too. So I think LA kind of draws that in. And so if you're not ready for that, I look at some of our friends that have made it, the sociopaths that you and I both know. No offense, if you're listening, you're not listening. You're busy.
Yeah, don't worry.
Whatever the fuck you're doing, you fucking psychos. But some of those friends, and I stand by this because like we have some mutual friends that are so fucking talented and so fucking amazing, and they're great people, and they have no fucking power in that town. And then you can go down the list of the ones who are insane, and you'll be like, they can do whatever the fuck they want. Mm-hmm. So it draws that in, and it's very hard for that. Like I think of one friend, he when we first started hanging out, he would tell me how he came from like this broken home, and he's able to, like people rattle their snake tail to you, right? Mm-hmm. There's like a kindness even in some of the most sociopathic people that will be like, oh, you're sensitive, I don't want to eat you. Let me just let you know, like, it's probably going to be like this. They'll tell you like, I've had multiple of them be like, I don't form connections with people that way, and I'm cool like just being alone forever. And you're like, oh fuck. And I have a fucking couple really good friends who are extremely successful that kind of had that conversation with me, knowing I'm a softie when we first started hanging out and doing creative stuff together or road dogging, and now they're killing it. But like they're off in that world where it's like, oh, like you, like I want to go on a vacation next weekend with like a friend that doesn't have anything to offer me. They strategically, I've literally watched them like, oh, like you strategically figured out who you're going to go away on that trip to. You spent $5,000 to go to Hawaii with someone that you're like to network with them. Like, and it's not just Hollywood. Obviously, I mean, I'm in real estate now. I see like the stuff you get encouraged to do, like, oh, that person knows someone who's dying. Let them know that you're a realtor. It's like, no, I'm cool. I'd like to be able to be a realtor that looks in my less than $10 million mirror at night. So I think Hollywood's got so much of that that's really tough for artists, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. I think the democratization of like media is like now it's like the asteroid hitting Earth, and like if we blow it up in the wrong way, then we'll just have that many more shards, and it's still going to be the same level or worse damage. We have the same thing with media, with news, and with entertainment now. Now you can be a sociopath in Amsterdam with making $10 million a week off of your TikToks and whatever else. So. Yeah, it's very weird. So it wasn't the place for me at that age because I was not hardened and I didn't understand who I was. And I was, like I said, like a sex worker or a new, a young gay dude moving to town, very malleable. Like even Ralphie, who innocently gave me a lot of advice. I mean, I didn't know who I was after a while, Maddie. So you might have heard me and been like, this guy's got all this great stuff. And I'd be like, oh, cool. And then I'd meet someone and they'd be like, you need to change your name. Ralphie told me to change my name to Tom Shefsky. And I just went, yes, sir. And I went and tell all my friends, like, my name's now Tom Shefsky. And I was like, it doesn't feel right. My tummy feels weird saying it. But they'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd be like, Ralphie May told me. It was like the first headliner that actually like remembered my jokes and like gave me these great spots. And so, yeah, I became one of those people who wasn't himself, ironically, right? You get into comedy because you can be yourself and be real. And I was just like, I don't know. At the end of it, the reason I quit was just like, I'm miserable. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. It's suffering. I mean, I would wake up crying, Maddie. It was bad. This is really, I feel bad even just ranting like I just did. If anyone's still listening.
There's comedy where you're on stage slanging jokes, interacting with the crowd, kind of performing your craft. And that's maybe 0.5% of it.
Dude, it's such a small percent.
Everything else is kind of what you're saying. It's like the relentless drive to advance yourself and your career in one of the most competitive, and this is really applies to most entertainment business, where there's no guarantee. I think there is merit to it. Like there are really talented people who through their talent can advance, but it's not just that. Like you have to be so dedicated and so laser focused on one thing that, like you're saying, you can't go to Hawaii unless it advances your career. And that can just spit a lot of people out.
And this isn't just talking about me, little old like open micer working his way up to, getting some decent spots and maybe starting a little career. Whitney was just on the Rick Rubin podcast and she's just talking about like the strategic friendships. And you're like, Jesus Christ, no wonder Gary Shandling was on drugs until he died. He never knew if he had a real friend. They tried to like word it like with Gary that like he never recovered from his brother's death and all this stuff, but it's like no, like dude, like I mean, look, you're like, who's Sarah Silverman hanging out with? Like someone that loves her or someone that's like, can I get a show? And you just never fucking know. And the fact that like Whitney, who should have enough money that she could cash out and leave the table, fold them and get out, and she's still talking about like, well, you got to be careful with this and that. And it's like, fuck that life, man. I think it's very weird. And so I think it's not even just like entry level. It's like, oh, like who wins? Just like in hustle culture, it's like whoever's the most insane and wants to die with the most, maybe not toys or money, but the most like, I achieved like this Tony Robbins level of trophy where you're like, is that
I mean, what we're talking about, John, I think applies, if you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Oprah, like
a combo of the three, if you ask me.
Kind of like titans of industry. I mean, you can pinpoint them and say like, they have to push away everything to have a balanced life. And I mean, one thing that's taken me 40 plus years to even accept is I was an econ major.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot kind of dumb with that. But one thing that was taught is like, maximization of whatever it is. Like if you're a corporation, profit max, and I think that is the role of a business.
Yeah.
But if you live your life like that, like if your goal, John, is to be like the best traveling comic, you're probably gonna have to sacrifice a home life. You're not gonna know your kids. You might not have kids. You're gonna be eating shit. Like you're gonna have like hot dogs and chicken wings. Like they're you just can't, if you you can't maximize everything. That's just like a mathematical principle. And if you maximize one element, you're gonna have to have trade-offs.
And I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
Like that you have those trade-offs, because like I said, like Fifi getting out of where Fifi grew up, to Fifi, it's like, what am I leaving behind? Now let's maximize who I am, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just people, like I generally think of the Comedy Store, because that was the scene that I was mostly in. It's like there's a lot of people that like they didn't have a home that they wanted to, like that was their way to, what do they call it? Like in psychology, like self-actualization, you know, that was their thing. So I don't think it's bad that exists for the person that needs the gang, or like Joel Jimenez is a great friend of mine. It's like he thrives on that, you know? He grew up in LA, like right there, right across the river. And like, that's, to me, I'm like, I just want to go to Disneyland with my kids too. Like, can I not have both? Is that greed for me to be like, I want to like just go to Cub Scouts with my son and just like, you know, not try to network with it. And now I'm in real estate. So now I'm like, I do real estate too, by the way. So right. You can't escape it in this fucking capitalism system, right? We're all merchants.
Yeah. And I think it's healthier just to accept it and not like, there's also a lot of good to it. And I think one aspect I've seen, and maybe I'm projecting, is like people never leave stand-up who are really like lifers. I mean, there's some who want to advance their acting career, or they want to get out of their shell and, you know, improve their corporate job. But, you know, when you've done like really kind of soul-crushing gigs and find some joy in it, I think it says something about you. It's not necessarily healthy, but it's kind of like a virus. It just like doesn't leave. So like,
yeah.
I think I've accepted that years ago. Like I'll probably, you know, I'll be 90. I'm like, I got a 8-minute spot at this cruise ship. I can't wait. Like, did you ever leave? Because I haven't talked to you about this. Like, did you ever leave? Because I know you're still working in comedy. Like what?
Yeah.
And then why'd you come back? Like,
this is again, I apologize for long stories, guys. Brevity is not a skill of mine. It's the soul of wit too. So I don't know what I'm doing in comedy. I quit. I was in San Diego. I went down there with my road dog, Nick Petrillo. And
shout out to Nick.
Shout out to Nick. Shout out to all these people. There's so many great people in entertainment and so many relationships with people that I love so much from that world too. So we'll talk about like all these like sociopaths running it, but then you're like, but Sandro Iocolano like is he's an angel. You know what I mean? Like what are you gonna do? Like there's just so many great people there. So Nick and I, who's extremely talented and has also quit. He's a union actor now, but he's super funny. He was one of the people that I met when I was like new at it, and I was doing like, was it Martini Blues, or it was someplace in Orange County, and he was a guest host, and he was the kindest guy. And that to me, like right away, like I'm like, you know, Corky from Life Goes On. If you smile at me, I will run over to you and be like, "You're my best friend." Like that's
start licking your face.
So I love Nick right away, and we became road dogs and did a bunch of spots together. But yeah. About 6 years ago, we went down to San Diego to go do a show with Gordon Downs, and it was the worst show. There was 2 people. We thought it was going to be like on the main stage at the Madhouse, and it was like that little room at the Madhouse, which is like a weird little room. It looks nice. It looks like an Eyes Wide Shut, like a stained oak room. But 2 people there, they were awful. We were awful, and I had a very Larry David. Like I just put the mic in there and said, "Screw this. I'm done." And I wasn't meaning it about that set. I was like, I'm just done. Like I walked out of there. I was like, why do I do this? Like, this is miserable. And I hadn't done it until like a month ago. Just a bunch of stuff happened, literally a month ago. A bunch of stuff happened. And I was just like, I called Evan Cassidy, another great dude in comedy and just great human being, called him up and I was like, kind of itching to do a spot. And Evan's got multiple spots. And, you know, we talk every week or so. And he's like, yeah, bro, come on down. I'll get you a spot. I was like, I don't want to commit to anything. I need to trick my brain. Like, there's parts of my personality I have to lie to. That's just my life. And I was like, I'll just come hang out with you. And I got there, ran into a couple other buddies, and Kyle Clark and I are like riffing, and then Evan just like tapped me on the shoulder. This is how you have to get me for anything, Matt. By the way, if you ever need to trick me into skydiving, just like don't give me time to be a Jew about it and be like, oh God, just be like, we're leaving in 5 minutes. Be like, yes, sir, and keep me distracted.
Yeah.
That's why I always say, like, if the doctor ever has bad news for me, I'm like, put me out right then and there in the doctor's office. Just give me an anesthesiologist, do what I need to do, wake me up 6 months later if I live. Don't give me time to think. So Evan just like was like, hey, I got these two guys. Then can I throw you up after that? And I was just like, okay, cool. And back to my conversation. And before I knew it, I'm like up on stage with a microphone and riffing, and people are laughing. And then I'm in my own head going like, holy fuck, John, this feels like you didn't even take 6 years off. It feels like yesterday. This feels so natural. And then it's like, shut up, John. Get focused. Get back. You're on stage. Get back on stage, John. I was like, oh yeah, and had the best time. Just riffed and had a couple new premises that I wanted to just like. But it's like the perfect storm of a bunch of stuff. You know, it's the Rick Rubin era right now with his podcast and his book coming out and the reels. So everybody's like making reels with Rick Rubin. It'll say like, man explains creativity. It'll say man. I love that for like newer generations. I'll be like, that's Rick Rubin, guys. But it's not just some weird man. That's Rick Rubin. This is, you know, it's going to produce Beastie Boys, for God's sake. He hangs out with Chris Rock and made Willie Nelson song. Come on. Wallflowers. Tom Petty. Anyways. It was the perfect timing. A lot of weird stuff happened. My best friend Kamel had a show out in his film got into a thing in Utah at the Slam Dance, and I'm hanging out with all these filmmakers, watching my friends film. Who Kamel and I were roommates forever in LA, and you know, made a bunch of stuff together. So it was like this perfect storm of like, all right, I have this career. I'm also, by the way, doing this career and trying to make my videos so that I'm creatively satisfied, and they're not hitting right. And everybody that does the videos for real estate is like, you got to make them like this. Which, by the way, here's a side note for your listeners. Everyone's got this whole thing like AI is going to take our jobs. Hey, people that act like robots have been taking our jobs forever.
Nothing new.
Nothing new. Like you go down the list of how to make a proper TikTok video, how to get your reels to go. You're satisfying our corporate masters and now their algorithm. It's like nothing new. Like now AI is going to do the thing that the sociopath that just acted like a robot's already doing. So what are we afraid of? You're still having a problem economically. It's the same thing. In fact, it'll just put your sociopath friend out of work, which will just be funnier. So oh, they took your job? That's how I felt when I was acting creative. So so I got back into stand-up, and I've done, at the time of this recording, 7 sets in the past like 4 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And the last 2 were like those kind of sets where you're like, I'm so thrilled right now. Like I got off stage and it was like, oh man, this feels so good because I have a job, I have a career, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm not begging someone to tell me what to do to be successful, and who am I as a guy, as a person, which is, you know, can be torturous over time if you're, you know, driving around every day and they're like, just take a left here, that's who you are, take a right here. I remember, I don't know if this ever happened to you, Matt. You seem like you've had it more together for much longer than me, but I remember Ralphie told me to shave my beard. You know, he was constantly constructing me, right? Don't do that. Okay, cool. Yeah. And I'm just humble because I thought that's how I learned from the tattoo world. Just do what the older man or woman says that knows what they're doing, or you're going to insult them and then they won't give you any more advice or opportunities. So I'd be like, cool. So you say, shave my beard. Okay. He's like, you can't have a beard. People don't like that. They don't, you know, you look darker and scarier with a beard and blah, blah, blah. Yes, sir. And I'd changed my name, shaved my beard. I'm like taking tags from his wife, which were horrible tags, by the way. I hope she doesn't listen to this podcast. If she does, cut this part out. She's giving me these hacky tags. I was just like, I can't, how much longer can I live with this? These hacky tags. And I'm just doing everything they're saying. And I'm friggin' miserable. Nothing's happening great in my career, except for I am getting to open for him. But like any celebrity, he's hounded by a bunch of hacks and weird people coming to hang out too. So you're also like sitting in the green room like, here comes the cavalry of people going, oh, let us in. And you're just like, oh my God. So that was miserable too. Like, cause I'm just a, you know, hillbilly that wants to be left alone with a small group of people to joke with, not career hawks. I'm sitting at the Comedy Store, and these 2 comics that look like total schlubs, Matt, and they both have big beards. They're big hippies like myself, but they're being themselves. And I just overhear their conversation. I'm like, it's like a scene in a movie. I'm like drinking my whiskey, like at one of those tall 4-tops out in the patio. And they're like, dude, congrats, you just booked that blah, blah, blah commercial. And the other one's like, dude, you did too. Like, and they like belly bumped and are hugging. And like, I had that like epiphany of like, they didn't have to shave their beards, and I'm not booking anything. I'm going out for all the wrong commercials, by the way. They're sending me the wrong stuff. And I was like, oh man, I'm like, who am I? You know? And it was so painful. And that epiphany didn't like change the course right there. I literally spent from that point on probably another 7 or 8 years of like literally waking up crying sometimes, you know, like who am I, watching the Jim Carrey documentary, like, am I his dad, the failed accountant guy? Like I thought I was Jim Carrey, and now, you know, just miserable shit. And then now, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm not a clean comic.
No, but you're a less clean podcast guest. So this shows like I need to just call you more, because I didn't know you'd taken that long of a break. I thought it was like 4 weeks, 6 years. But I follow you on social media, and then all of a sudden, like I'd see you with these like cheesy photos, and you're showing like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And like seeming legitimately happy. And like I was happy for you, but I mean, I met you as this kind of like gruff stand up who would push the envelope, and I mean that in a good way, not like some inauthentic type. But then it's like real estate, and then I kind of was thinking, well, you're on your own, you kind of control your own destiny a little bit, but I want to get your side. Like what made you pick real estate, and you seem to like it. Like what made you enjoy it?
In the words of was it who the heck was it that we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us?
Was that Malcolm X?
I think it was in Malcolm X. A great film, by the way. I didn't choose real estate. It chose me. So I was still a comic, and I was like reading about online. I was like, okay, I don't think I'm ever going to I like kind of lost faith that I was ever going to make money as a comic, but I still loved it, even though I was miserable and crying. But I was like, if I could find a way to I started reading, and I was like, passive income, this term that I was like, okay.
Was it Rich Dad, Poor Dad? I read that.
Unfortunately, I've read that book as well. I've read many of his books. Too bad he's like a friggin' hilarious train wreck now that people still hold up on a pedestal. That culture, we could go into hustle culture and real estate culture and like insane 10x culture as well, which is like really been a funny revelation for me as someone that exited entertainment because everyone was crazy, and then get into something else and then be like, oh, there's like levels of this that are like, it's like our whole culture just has got a lot of things we need to work out. Hopefully AI will help us and not just say, you're never going to work it out. I was reading about real estate, and I was like, oh, I was reading about having a passive income, and real estate was the big thing. Bigger Pockets was kind of like a smaller, it was about 10 years ago today. It was like a website that was like gaining steam for like the non-traditional, just like how golf is like everybody golfs now, and there's a lot of humor and like looseness and cool people that golf. I think real estate's kind of taken that over the past couple decades too. So Bigger Pockets, I'm on Reddit, and then someone has a link to Bigger Pockets, and I start reading on Bigger Pockets. Then I start buying their books, and I call my brother, who's an engineer, and he's just kind of the opposite of me. He's real quiet, reserved, great dry humor, by the way, really dark, dry, great humor. And he lives an engineer life. I thought when I got into just living the artist life, I was like, you guys are such squares, you idiots. Like, I'm living the life being an artist. Meanwhile, Matt, and you probably can see this crystal clear, him and his buddies, all fairly mentally healthy. Their level of addictions and problems were nothing like comedy, where every 2 weeks you find out someone else killed themselves, right?
You're not joking.
They all buy the toys they want. Like that on the weekends, they go ride motorcycles up, the canyon, and they have like sports cars and like stuff that like Henry Cavill memes would say is mediocre, but like anyone that like is truly paying attention is like, no, that's the life. And they're out of the limelight. They clock out from their jobs and like do great things, have great relationships, and never worry like, am I good enough? Am I going to make the money? I'm like, I thought I took the smart route. Let's say my square brother who got an engineering degree lives the amazing life, and he can live anywhere, by the way. Like, he doesn't have to live in a crowded, awful area. So I call him and I'm like, hey dude, like I found a way that we can like, you can like chill out a little bit more at work. I can do this. Like, let's get into real estate together. Like, it's all about like families building some sort of like, platform foundation for their kids and whatnot. And so he would be my square dude that can get a loan. I'd be the guy reading all the books, doing all the sweat equity footwork. And so we started researching, and we decide, hey, why don't I'll pay the mortgage and figure out some stuff with jobs and my little whatever I could do, and he'll be able to get a loan. And if he already had a house, by the way, in South Bay, small, cute little Craftsman, like we could get a house together, and then we could use his house as our first like blueprint of like a working model of us starting a real estate portfolio. So we put that into action. That takes a couple, a year or so, but we put into action. Obviously, he writes up like a nice little manifesto, or what do you call it, like a proposal. Both of our wives are like, let's do it. We move in together. We live in South Bay for a bit. Then we finally find our house, find renters, which, by the way, the best renters in South Bay. We've always had these amazing families there. Just shout out to South Bay families that rent houses.
Way to go, South Bay renters. We love you.
Well, yeah, that's right. Hashtag South Bay tenants and landlord. Our relationships are
no squatters there. Yeah.
No squatter, not newsworthy. These are symbiotic relationships of two families coming together and getting what we need. It's like good love making. That's the name of our real estate company. Good love making families. It's very
with our tenants.
With our tenants. Yeah. That sounds bad. They're like, what do we have to do to get this app approved? Well, how's your credit? And how are you guys in the sack? We're swingers. Have you seen Super Troopers? So we got that into play. Our first baby, my wife and I's first child, we took a lot to have that child. I ride bikes. They said my motility was low. Kamel, my roommate, and my wife said that my sperm was always out for bike rides whenever it was supposed to be entering an egg. It was very hard to have our first baby. Thank God it all worked out. But long story short, the second baby was not planned for because we didn't think we had to be careful.
Yeah, just letting loose, Shevsky.
Yeah, that's right. First baby was a science baby. Second baby was a tequila baby. So when the first baby came, it was like I had my podcast Crime with Rich Slayton, another amazing person and great comedic partner. That podcast was blowing up. We were getting thousands and thousands of downloads every episode, like 20,000 downloads a month, selling out live shows. Like it was crazy good. But then the second baby, I was like I had that I have to grow up now. Like I can't do what I'm doing with two kids now. Like one kid, it's like you get them in the Yoda backpack. Two kids, you're like, all right, daddy.
I've got anchors.
Yeah, you can't have the luxuries that you think you deserve. It doesn't matter. Like it's just like it's more important than you know. And I'm on the phone with my brother, and he's like, dude, you know so much about real estate. Like you've just been studying it. We're doing our plan. He's like, just go be a realtor. And I was just like, ew. Like I'm a writer, I'm a stand-up, like gross, man. Like I'd rather just keep being a caterer. Like I was catering for blood
sleeves. Yeah, catering is a lot closer to stand-up.
But my brother was like, dude, Greg makes like 10 grand when someone buys a house and he doesn't do anything. And that, telling a comic,
I like the not doing anything part. Tell me more.
10 grand not doing anything and a guy named Greg, I meet that whole profile. So, which by the way, my brother, like 99% of the public has no idea what real estate agents do. So I was lied to by my brother. If you're listening, I still love you, dude. But seriously, we do way too much work. I hate how much work we do. If you're a realtor and you're like, oh, it's really easy, I don't do that much work, you're not a good realtor. I'm just saying it right now. I have friends that are like, dude, we were way overpaid. I was like, that's because you are a bad realtor and you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing for your client. If you're a good realtor, you're busy AF and it's a lot of work. Less stress as you get more and more into it because you start to know, like Lemmy knowing the road. You're just kind of like, don't bother with that. That's not a concern. Keep going that way. You know, but it's exhausting and it's a lot of work if you want to make a living at it. If you're just one of those like weirdos, it's like, I just want to help my uncle when he sells his house. Like, no, you want the commission check and you don't know what you're doing. You're a liability. Anyways, so I go to the gym, and then after the gym, I call my wife. I'm like, I'm going to get some fish burritos for us. I go put my order in at Alberto's, and there's a real estate agency right next door. And so while I'm waiting for our fish burritos, I look at the posts on the wall, and an agent pops his head out the door like a cute little suburban Christian guys, they're just like, hey there, thinking about buying a house? And, it's just the friendliest, I love people like this, by the way. This is just like, this is like how Trey Parker and Matt Stone talk about like living in South Park with the Mormons. Like, I just love good, down-to-earth human beings. Everyone's mad at them now because they don't agree with us on abortion. But in general, these are just good, down-to-earth human beings that are loving and wonderful. if you get them right in the right spot of the middle class, they're just good people, like most of us. And I was like, nah, dude, but I've actually been thinking about like becoming an agent. And he just pops his card out and goes like, let's have a talk. Let's have coffee. And I didn't expect it. Long story short, impossible now. Our listeners are like, yeah, Judd, long story short, that was 25 minutes ago.
Mormons don't drink coffee. We're on to you.
That's a great point. Do they drink matcha? No. Just tell them the matcha is caffeine. It's not coffee. There's no caffeine in matcha. That sounds like one of the planets they go to, right? Matcha. If you're really good, you can get 25 wives on matcha. So, yeah, we met up. I took my test. I studied for 6 months because I have a thick skull. I'm neurodivergent. I do not learn fast, and it takes me a long time to retain memory. I had to take these courses online, and I would write songs on my computer with a guitar. I would record me doing like Frank Zappa style songs with like slow, weird, sexual, kind of weird lyrics that had the answers to the test, basically. So I just studied whatever the study material was, and just like until I was brainwashed, the acreage is blah, blah, blah. I don't remember now. I haven't listened to the song forever. Acreage is 43,000 square feet, something like that.
Sounds good. You said it with confidence. I'm not going to fact check.
Yeah, dude, it's roughly that. There's an actual exact amount. I think about it all the time too when I'm looking at properties. Like 18,000 square feet. That's we're looking at almost half an acre. That's great. But I got my license, and pretty much everything that I wanted in comedy fell in my lap in real estate gracefully without the efforts. I just flowed gracefully into it. And all these adults, I don't just mean like older people, I mean people that have been in the industry. My initial mentor, Chris, another great human being, great realtor. He's actually a year younger than me. So I still look up to him and ask him for advice, but I'm like, I'm older than him biologically, but real estate wise, he's like in it 20 some odd years. But everything fell into my lap. I was like, oh, the Bill Burr of real estate in my small community, not overall. No, not Ryan Serhant didn't offer his hand out. But like the Bill Burr of my community in real estate going, hey, come right along, dude. I'd love to show you what we're doing. Can you hold on for just 1 minute?
Yes.
Does this is like a Rogan. I'm going to go pee, right? We'll come back.
Right, I'll stop your...
Brought to you by Athletic Greens. Yeah, just the offerings, the hands of these people saying, hey, man, like we'd love to teach you. And I think because obviously comparing it to entertainment where everyone's trying to get in, and real estate's completely, I mean, it's been made more sexy now, like by the TV shows, but I think a lot of the elders in real estate are excited when you're enthusiastic and wanting to learn and actually paying attention. I tried to mentor a couple guys, and like I was like, oh, they probably... the elders probably of this industry have probably seen what I just saw when I tried to mentor these two guys that were like, all right, we got this thing on Saturday, this thing. And they'd be, oh, I can't be there for that. I mean, I was like glued to my mentor for a year. Like he would go to the bathroom and I would just be outside the bathroom, like taking notes, you know? So if you show that dedication, like they just hand the keys to you. And I had them bring me in on certain deals where like you're going from being a broke comic that maybe got like a little writing gig where you got $1,000 or $2,000 check a few times, but mostly like $200 checks, right? You're just living off of nothing scraps. I was getting paid for catering from Bledsoe's more, which was a great company, by the way. Love Bledsoe's. Shout out. Great company to work for. They were just fantastic. But, going from that to like my mentor being like, hey, you want to help me with this home sale? And I was like, sure. And then like him splitting the check up and me being like, is this for real? Like
there's a comma in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a comma in there. I was getting paid great too. I was a backup editor. What do you call it? Substitute editor for the Jimmy Dore show. And Steph and Jimmy also fantastic to work for, treated me great, paid me great. But it was like right at that transition where I was like, I got to get out of entertainment, including this. And once I got a couple of those checks from my mentor in real estate, I was able to be like, guys, I can't be an editor anymore. Which I still love cutting stuff to this day, but professionally, it was nice to just get into it. So yeah, real estate was very, very welcoming. My broker, James, my friend, Austin, my lender, Cole, my buddy, Jeff, and I have two great lenders, Jeff Welgan and Cole Strange, and they're both just amazing. So I've just been around these people that are like comedy fans too, by the way. So like immediately they're like, oh, you do stand up? And I was like, not anymore. I'm a real estate agent. I'm a square like you guys. But they just wanted to talk stand up. I mean, Cole, like his favorite comics, Chappelle, and so we just could talk Chappelle all day and Attell, and yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So it's a wonderful industry. there's different sects of the industry. So I'm in the suburbs. So like I said, it's like nice middle class human beings that have humility and like they do community things with their church and uh, uh, they're just good people, you know?
Yeah.
There's a whole other level of it if you're like, I want to make a lot of money in real estate, and it's just like Hollywood where you're like, okay, like hustle
Welcome to the
culture.
Oppenheim group. Yeah.
Yeah. The same group that invented the bomb. Is it the same family? Is it Oppenheimer?
I think that's Oppenheimer versus Oppenheim, but maybe they cut off a couple letters to
Did you Oppenheimer, bro? Oh, I Oppenheimer.
a couple times.
Couple times. So there's my boring story. Sorry, listeners. I know this is a great podcast.
No, I think it's fascinating. And you know, when I want to get my wife hot and bothered, we watch real estate shows because that's her aphrodisiac.
Is that really?
Yeah, but that's a different episode, and you
That's
can
so funny, dude.
call her about that.
Mine's a Parks and Rec superstore.
But what I want to know is what real estate show is the least unrealistic? Because I'm sure they're all bullshit, but what is like the most true to life from your
I don't
perspective?
know if I've watched anything in the past few years. Like I watched like that selling in Dubai, or was it Bahrain? I think there was a Bahrain show. I watched like random stuff. I don't like when I used to tattoo, people would talk to me about the tattoo shows. I was like, I literally watched like 10 minutes of it. It wasn't my thing. It just I want to if you want to watch porno without the sex, count me out.
Yeah.
Like stuff that's such McDonald's for the mind, like I'd rather bust a nut. So I want to watch actual adult cinema if that's the case. Otherwise, like let's watch Curb Your Enthusiasm. Let's watch Mighty Boosh. South Park. That's what I watch. That kind of stuff.
When in doubt, watch South Park.
Yeah.
Like now that you're kind of on the inside of real estate, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about the industry?
Oh, I think the public doesn't understand it at all, and I think it's so weird. I mean, like the NAR settlement and the stuff that was coming up there is like, it's kind of like Carlin talked about, like the circus and the plural medias, like they just need food to chew out and to spit baby bird into the public's mouth. The stuff that just happened was like really interesting. A lot of people were like, "Oh, you guys can't fix commissions anymore. How's that going to work for you?" And it's like, we couldn't. My broker James told me, like when I first started, like just make sure you're always disclosing whenever you're meeting with people that commissions are negotiable, and they've always been negotiable. And when people go, "You're not getting 6% anymore," it's like, I don't remember. I can count on my hands how many times I've gotten 6%, and I don't get 6%.
Yeah,
that's what
there's
is getting like, dude, it's getting divvied up to the buyer's agent who's representing the buyer, and like there's all this stuff that we have to pay. Our brokerage gets money because they're insured and they spend all this money and have all this liability. Like so it looks a certain way. It looks like we don't do anything, but it's like interacting with your clients, getting new clients too. Like it's like when you find someone you don't know, it's like dating. You don't know if you guys are going to end up making sweet love and going on a 2-week cruise. You might just be like going out for some dinners, which is fun. But if it's your livelihood, you're like, oh, like you spend a lot of time and energy. I have a good friend, one of our friends, a great comic, another comic who I'm close with. I was helping her look at $1 million houses in LA. She ended up buying a house in another state. I don't get any money for that.
Yeah.
I didn't refer her to the agent because she did the deal with the seller by themselves. She still called me through the transaction just to advise her, and I, with what I could for another state. Like, I'm not sure. Check with they had a lawyer do a lot of this stuff for their paperwork. So check with the lawyer about that. In California, it works like this over there. But long story short, I mean, I worked with that person quite a bit, and that's just like one of like 50 people that you can work with a ton and show houses to, spend money on lunch and gas and all of your time, as Jim Morrison would say, trade in your hours for a handful of dimes. And you trade in your hours and you don't get anything for it. And that's fine because I love what I do. And when I do, it's like hunting. When the shot actually goes through the boar's heart, dude, we're having bacon. It's going to be freaking amazing. So it's the public doesn't see that. And they allow, like they do with politics, for our corporate masters to tug at their heartstrings and tell them when they can be happy, when they can be angry, and maybe more importantly, what they can and can't be angry about and where to focus.
Yeah.
Like there's like, remember Playboy? I used to read Playboy when I was a kid. And obviously the allure of gorgeous women was the reason you start. but the writing in Playboy was amazing as a child. Our corporate masters was one of the columns in there. And I still just think of it in that same way. We're like, oh, yeah, our corporate masters, they allow us to do this and that. And so I feel like with real estate that people don't understand what's going on out there. And I think as AI progresses, eventually I will either be out of a job, as most of us will, or I will just be working with the uber wealthy, because what the media likes to do is they paint this picture like they do with taxing and business and regulations. They kind of show you Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Nestle Corp, and they go, we're going to stick it to them. And then they create these rules. And Jeff Bezos, and nothing against these guys, by the way, I don't know them
Alternative
personally.
minimum tax comes to mind, but please continue.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics because I'm just a hippie over here with a microphone. But my overall gist of it is like those groups find their ways around, like the tax code, right? Like we don't have a flat tax.
We don't have a flax. Well, if you buy enough flaxseed oil, it's not cheap at Trader Joe's.
Every time I go to the bathroom, I just go like, I got to pay a flax tax.
That is part of the flax tax.
Like a flat tax. Does it benefit you and me to have a flat tax? Yeah. Like it'd be better if everyone just paid 10% of what they made and it never changed. It benefits groups that can pay someone to constantly find ways around paying 0 or 1% tax or something like that. So we have that same thing where they paint this picture of like this evil bad guy, and then they make the regulations harder for the middle class to thrive. And then they pit the angry middle class young people and poor people against each other and the thrivers in the middle class. And then the princes go, bro, we got everything. Yes. Fight amongst the races and the religions. Yeah. So let's go screw the slaves and build some more stuff that's fancy and not needed in this world. So I think, people don't understand real estate. They don't understand anything. No one knows how the sausage is made. You can tell me about a bunch of stuff and I won't know how it's made. I just know real estate because that's what I work in. But
I like how the Sultan of Brunei just joined the program. That was some good.
That was not supposed to be. That was a Carlos Mencia impression. Don't get me in trouble, Matt.
I liked it. Well, because you've done, cool things in different careers. I want to ask a question. You can answer it in any way. Just don't make it about your family because that's a BS cop out.
Yeah.
We know your kids are great. Blah blah blah. And your wife. What career wise are you most proud of?
What career-wise am I most proud of?
Like that you've done in your careers.
My family. No, you can't say family. What am I most proud of in my careers? It's a really good question. I can tell you what I love so much about real estate, which is what I love in comedy and anything else. I love teaming up. I have like weird, deep anxieties about the nature of reality, existence, the finite nature of biological existence. I've been called a stabilist by one of my conspiracy theorist friends that lives in a hole in the hills in Utah that's hiding from everything because of what Alex Jones told him 20 years ago. And he's like, "Oh, you're a stabilist," and I was like, "What is that?" And he sent me this giant flow chart that is way too tiny font for me to read. I'm supposed to be wearing glasses, but I have a lot of issues with those things. So I find it reassuring as I get older to see society going on, to see the sun come out the next day, to see people working together. And that is like one of the biggest antidotes for me to be like, not having a nervous breakdown every day is like, working with people, teaming up with them and feeling the achieval. Like I feel like I'm paddling down a canoe in a strange river I'm the river pro, and I'm like, duck, paddle that way, go left, right. Okay, guys, duck. There's arrows coming or musket, stuff flying over us. And so I really enjoy that. And I think the human feeling for anybody, especially someone who's failed their way through to live just a nice middle-class life, is like, oh, it feels good to wield a sword of something that I'm good at.
Yeah.
I know stand-up is very nice to feel like loved and have people be like, you're the best. But for me, the internal part, the fire that's flamed, is like, oh, I didn't fall off. Like, I'm going to go on another tangent because that's all I know. That's my skill. I have really bad proprioception. I'm the knuckle dragger term is I'm a clumsy fool. But,
perfect for someone who likes to bike ride. But
yeah. Oh, my fantasy. I mean, I have dreams where I'm like snowboarding and doing crazy stuff, and I'm skateboarding it like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Like I dream in airplanes and flying and flowy stuff. And in reality, I'm just Woody Allen going, "Oh God, that's terrifying! No!" Like I can't. You can ask my buddy Pat. Like I'm just the most pathetic skateboarder. He still jokes about these 2 steps I couldn't ollie down at Ayala Park when we were teenagers, and I still think to myself, like, would I go? I could hop my mountain bike off them, but I'm like, I still wouldn't jump a skateboard off those 2 steps. They're just there's something about the shape of them. Oh God, pathetic. I'm awful physically, and I crave it. And once we are all uploaded to that giant quantum computer one day, hopefully not to be tortured like a Rick and Morty episode. Hopefully I just get to like make a bunch of love and snowboard off of cliffs. So there's something that I love about like the teamwork and the feeling like I'm doing something and guiding and being a master of it, because I would love to be physically a master, like a gymnast, that stuff, but just wasn't in the cards until we get our titanium bodies, right, man?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And kind of in summation, what are you most optimistic about?
You poor podcast host. In summation, that's
as in wrap it up.
What did you say? In summation, what is what?
What are you most optimistic about, John?
I was actually going to ask you, I don't know if you have a time limit. I do at some point, but I don't even care now because we're having so much fun. I was going to ask you what you're optimistic about, because I gravitate towards that because so much is cynicism, and so much our culture, being the death cult that we are, loves that, like, apocalyptic is so huge nowadays in the cultural meme. And I don't think it's healthy. I mean, I think Michael Shermer was talking about on his podcast, like we need to be thinking about protopia as opposed to what was it, utopia and dystopia. He's like, we need a protopia. And I'm like, I don't get off on like, yeah, it's all going to shit. I was like, that's not like a relief for me. Like, that's terrifying. I have kids and like I don't have a cyanide pill for myself. Like it sounds horrible. So I like to ask people that seem somewhat optimistic, like, where do you think we're going possibly, and how can we like, are you big on, like, do you think climate change is the end all be all? Do you think climate change is like
no and here's why. Not because I know the science, and I'm sure there is risk to it. It just, when I just saw this week, John, like, we're not in a drought in California. I'm a California native. Every year of my life, we've been in a drought.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in middle school, we're going to run out of gas in 10 years, or there's the polar ice caps are melting, or there's a hole in the ozone layer. There's always some boogeyman. And I'm not saying, I want to be very clear, like, that these aren't legitimate concerns. I guess what I'm optimistic is twofold. One, I'm nebulous when people say, all right, the answer is more government control and taxes. That's why I'm a little bit skeptical of a lot of like climate change. It's like, well, if we just cut out the airline industry and people didn't have cars and you did what we said and taxed 98% of your existence, climate change won't be a problem. I'm like, that's a way bigger problem. So I'll flip it. What I'm optimistic about is almost like with like AIDS, you know? Like, there was this terrible like death plague of the 80s. Yeah. And I don't want to minimize how scary it was, and way too many people died from it. But really smart people put their heads together and made it less bad. Yeah. I mean, with I feel that way with AI. There's probably some really scary things that can happen from it that you and I can't conceive with our lizard brains. But smart people are going to work together, and it won't be as bad as we fear. So I think the common theme is the power of humanity to do amazing things that we can't even fathom, because we've always had boogeymen. We've always had things that, you know, the sky's falling, the world's going to end. And I'm scared. I mean, I'm honestly like way more scared of nuclear war than I am of climate change.
Thank you.
And not to say that it's not scary, but I still like think there's going to be a way, because we have survival instincts. And at the end of the day, like, as long as we're on this thing spinning around, people generally don't want to be hated. There is going to be exceptions, but I think it comes down to like humans doing really cool things that aren't the result of someone telling them to do. It's a result of their own motivated self-interest. And that's one of the most magnanimous, loving, kind of communal things I can think of. So that's what I'm optimistic about.
I mean, I love it. So Do you have like what do you call that? Remember that Dooms clock they have?
I've had to replace it 17 times since since the 90s.
Well, it's like the funny, like the cynics get a hard on whenever they do it. They're like, they're inching it closer. They're like, oh yeah, how close are we to midnight? The cynics love that stuff. That's part of their personality. It's not their fault. Everyone's God's children. We're how we evolved, right? But you mentioned, the big NW. That terrifies me. It terrifies me to survive something like that.
Yeah. I'd rather die than survive.
But I did listen to, right? Yeah. So we got to get a house in downtown LA, right? What's the ground zero for that? I feel like, even that is not as catastrophic. People love to just paint that picture. Like they throw World War III around a bunch. They throw we're all going to die around a bunch. But I heard someone on a podcast talking about it, like how a nuclear war is more likely to play out. And it's not like everyone just launches them all and everybody and the whole earth is polluted by it. There's so many different countries with different kinds of weapons to block this and block that even that can help me like go like, all right, the likelihood of like everything turning to Mad Max is lower than, don't listen to Peter Thiel do an interview or whatever, but other than I don't know. That's definitely a trigger thing for me where I'm like, you think nuclear war is likely? I feel it feels so like Dr. Strangelove, but I'm like, the fingers aren't on the buttons the way it is in the movies. I don't know.
Right. Well, we have to have you back. But in the meantime, John, where can people out there learn more about you? Where can we drive? Millions of people are watching right now. Where can
they freaking better be?
Where can we funnel them?
Gods of Real Estate is my podcast. Fancy Boy Edition. It is so much fun. So what Gods of Real Estate is, you can find it on Spotify, Apple. Basically what it is if you've ever seen Rick and Morty or Adventure Time, if you take MTV Cribs and you put us in that universe, I have a guest on. And when I have that guest on, what I do is I just say, hey, describe your fantasy house. And we just start off with the Gods of Real Estate drone floating over the top. And then we get to a point where you're saying, all right, welcome us in, like Architectural Digest or MTV Cribs. And you just give us an audio imaginary tour of this super high-tech, super magical house. That's the only rules. It's got to be high-tech and magical. You can't come in there and be like, it's got a hot tub in the master bedroom. It's really cool. I'm like, no. It needs, like Nate Hurd had, another great dude. Nate Hurd had a zero gravity room in his fantasy house. Jade Catapretta, another great LA comic, talented dude, friend of mine. She had a lazy river that goes around her house with sexualized dolphins. Mm. I mean, you just go down the list. Zane Hellberg, one of my road dogs. Like these people just have these super creative, like I said, Rick and Morty, Adventure Time level stuff, and they just improv it on the spot. So it's super rad. It's called Gods of Real Estate, Fancy Boy Edition. It's wherever you can get podcasts. Eventually, I'll learn how to put it on YouTube, like what we're doing with this. I really appreciate you guys listening. If there's like 7 or 8 listeners left. Really cool.
I appreciate it, John. And I appreciate you, John Tomaszewski. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, man. Great time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.